The digital global age has pushed the traditional boundaries of each and every enterprise across each and every nation, its government, industries, organizations, and academia, which is called NGIOA. As the emerging borderless world redefines the very parameters and parameters of an enterprise, managing the undefined and undocumented borders and securing them in an increasingly borderless world has become a complex challenge. Building, managing, and securing any enterprise in a borderless world is complex as it requires not only understanding of a world that has triangular linkages between geospace, cyberspace, and space, but also has dotted and solid line reporting relationships between an enterprise and an NGIOA. When any single enterprise across any NGIOA tries to secure its undefined and porous borders amidst dotted and solid relationships, the intended, unintended, and perverse consequences are creating a challenge in defining, building, managing, and maintaining a stable and sustainable enterprise security system. The focus here on an enterprise security system is to emphasize that it is the enterprise, its ideas, initiatives, relationships, and activities that are to be secured in a digital global age, and that the security of data, computers, and networks is only a means to the end. Discuss this further, I'm delighted to welcome Brian Bobo. Brian is Vice President Enterprise Security at Schneider National. Welcome, Brian. We are delighted to have you on Risk Roundup.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Brian, to begin with, let's talk about enterprises today as it exists in a borderless digital global economy. As I said in the intro, that they have solid and dotted line internal and external relationships. Amidst that, how do we define an enterprise?
How would I define an enterprise?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the way I would define an enterprise in private industry would be really, it's a really interesting question. So I would say that at Schneider, it has to do with our business, obviously where we do business, but it deals with our customers, their associates that work with us, the governments that we interact with, and really, I think you mentioned it earlier, it's just, there's this ecosystem of interactions that all work with, even when you think about things like commodities and commodities market and how that impacts our fuel prices, and just the economy in general, and all that works together. So when you think about that in terms of the enterprise, there's the well-defined pieces of it that you can look at in terms of our location or the technology we use or orange trucks that you see driving around. But then there's all these other pieces of it that really work and are within the interests of Schneider, which as a corporation, which are similar to state actors and interests they deal with and how they interact with their environment.
Yes. I mean, you're right. And like you said, the enterprise now is spread across nations and it's not located in one particular location. So geographic location doesn't define what's in the enterprise anymore. Enterprise is defined by data, security, and by its relationships, both internal as well as external, across NGIO. That means across with the governments, with other industries, within the industry, with other businesses, and academia and organizations, and many different vendors, suppliers. So how are traditional businesses adapting to the change in nature of an enterprise? Because the enterprise, in a digital global age, is entirely different than what it used to be in geospace, where it was located only in a geospace, and in a particular location with no internal external relationships or linkages. So how are enterprises, in your viewpoint, adapting to this new reality of the digital global age?
Well, I think the biggest way is the way you define risk as an enterprise, and you look at risk, and risk sounds negative, but it's not always negative. It's just really all the different factors that impact your business. And I think what you're seeing is that there's a lot more concern around legal and governance in terms of regulations and those kind of things. It's always been there, but it feels like that continues to grow and be a bigger concern every year. And then when we look at the security space, it used to be that you really worried about making sure your facilities were locked up and people weren't, stealing things. And now it's really morphed into information being much more valuable than it used to be. And really, even there, not very long ago, you really focused on protecting your own information, and everybody kind of thought about information in terms of Schneider's information, and what information is really important to Schneider, and what do I need to protect in terms of Schneider's information. Well, now I really need to think about it in terms of everybody's information that I touch in some way or another. And so our customers' information is extremely important. Our associates' information is extremely important, even our vendors. And so we look at this much different, I think, than we used to. And we also have to go past the idea of, and this is where it's similar in the physical security area. There's only so many things you can do to keep people from stealing a truck, for instance. And so we do things to discourage that. But sooner or later, if somebody's determined, they'll probably be able to steal one of our vehicles. But we try to minimize that risk as much as possible. Well, in the information side of things, too many people think they can protect everything. And they don't take a step back and say, well, what's really, really important, and where do I need to focus my limited resources? And then accept a little more risk in other areas where the information is maybe not very important.
Yes, yes, I hear you. I mean, what was interesting about your experience and your current role is that you are not only in charge of information security, but you are also in charge of physical security. So there is a very good integration that is a part of your responsibility, that you are looking at the security overall, not just information security, a piece of that, or not just physical security. So that is very welcoming. And let me ask you this: in a digital global age, there is nothing more asymmetrical, more disruptive, more revolutionary, or more innovative than the world changing power of an idea. As the breadth of impact of not only today's rapid change, but also coming tomorrow's change is affected by new ideas and new threats, it's important to understand not only how an idea flows in a complex, borderless world, but also how a threat flows. How does an idea or a threat flow in a digital global age? Your thoughts based on your experience in the work that you're doing.
Well, I think the biggest thing that is exciting about ideas in the current age, and it really isn't even related to security, but we wouldn't have had that opportunity. And so when you look at ideas, you can now share ideas with huge audiences that in the past may not have heard it, or if they did hear it, it would be because you happened to publish it in a trade magazine and they read the magazine. Or so ideas today can spread so much faster. And then with that, you get, if you have an idea and you share it, you get a lot more input from other people. You can test the idea, you can ask for opinions, you can do things much more broadly than in the past and much quicker. And so I think when I look at ideas, what's exciting is that because society has become so collaborative across broad spaces and broad perspectives, that ideas are not only are you able to share them, but you're able to grow them and develop them more quickly than you could in the past.
That's very true. So, in your experience, how does a threat, let's say, for example, your organization, your enterprise, how does a threat, information flow in an organization? What have you experienced?
So, obviously we use, email and and the collaborative tools that are now available to everybody. And to me, Link, or used to be Microsoft Communicator, is interesting. Is now people are using email less, and they're, IMing or texting effectively a lot more, as people just become more in tuned and connected to technology than they've ever been. The advent of the smartphone changes the way people communicate, where we don't, I don't know if a lot of people even know that their phone can be used for telephone calls anymore, because it's used for everything else. And so people are starting to work that way. So we're leveraging a lot of that. We're trying to really evaluate social tools, and how do we leverage social tools within our corporate environment to help ideas spread more quickly, and really leverage the knowledge of the entire organization. And beyond that, until we figured that out, we do a lot of things where we purposely bring groups together, and those groups are issued challenges to say, here's something we're trying to figure out. You guys come back with a solution, and then maybe another group has the opposite problem, or the problem from a different perspective, and the two groups will kind of come up with an idea, and then they'll present both of them, and a lot of times the two morph into whatever the solution is. So there's a lot of exciting things we do that way. And then obviously we're leveraging things like the video teleconference and so forth to do that, because we want to leverage our entire company across all of our locations, and not just at headquarters.
So a lot more collaborative approach that you are having right now.
Yes.
Wonderful. So Brian, an enterprise security encompasses an entire enterprise: the people, the processes, the technology, information, investment, ideas, the borders, the relationships, and more, and is the most pressing need across every enterprise across nations. What are the challenges facing enterprise security in a borderless digital global age amidst complex internal and external relationships? As we talked before, that you have relationships with so many dotted and solid relationship with so many suppliers, so many vendors across NGIOA. So what are the challenges broadly that any enterprise, including yours, face right now?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is that there needs to be a shift in perspective on how people think about security. And so a lot of my IT security career, a lot of IT security professionals really focus on technology. So there's all these really cool tools out there, and there's a ton of vendors, and I think they multiply days. Like there's another tool or another vendor that's popping up that's going to come in and save you from something or another. And then what tended to happen was the people in the process were overlooked, because people were always a problem. Your end users are always the ones that'll get you compromised. And then process, that was kind of an afterthought. It was all about technology and closing all these gaps through technology. But the reality is that technology can't detect everything. It can't save you from everything. And so it's really about looking at it holistically. And this is where the physical side of security has done a really good job of this for a long time, in terms of really leveraging people and processes, because the reality is that if you come home this afternoon, and maybe sometime this evening you look outside and it's maybe late at night, and you see that your neighbor left their garage door open and somebody's sneaking around there, you probably call the police to help make sure your neighbor doesn't have something stolen. And so that's really, the police can't be everywhere. Security can't be everywhere. And so you have to leverage the entire organization. That's where we've been really successful. We just have a phenomenal group of associates, and when they see something that doesn't look right, whether it's either in the physical security space or on their computer, it's not behaving the way it should be, or they get an email that looks really kind of odd, or they clicked on something and soon they realized, I shouldn't have done that. They're really quick to let us know. And so there's times where our associates catch things that our technology can't. And so we're looking at different ways of how do we leverage our people better, and how do we augment the technology with people, or the people with technology? How do we want to look at that? So.
Yes, you are absolutely right. I mean, the security is no longer a government affair. We all have to get involved, and even in an enterprise, you cannot depend on security only, or within a certain group. Everyone has to be responsible. So we need to bring about that change in culture. That security is everyone's responsibility, risk is everyone's responsibility. So that really helps. And I always say that security is no longer a government affair. It's an NGIOA affair, means nations, it's government, industries, organizations, academia. Here I'm looking at holistically about a nation. And the same way, when you look at enterprise, holistically, everyone working in an enterprise, they all are responsible for security. So you are right on that, mind frame that, we have to change the culture and everyone has to be involved. And that's the only way to probably, achieve security in this very complex digital global age. So let me ask you this, Brian, that enterprise security governance is a strategy for reducing the possibility and probability of assets owned in geospace and cyberspace from being stolen or damaged by acts in cyberspace. Do you think that as a result of the boundaries of the blurring enterprises due to the changes brought on by the digital global age, there needs to be a change in business and operating models of an enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that business is conducted is changing and evolving really quickly, and so that needs to, obviously, businesses need to question how they do business even with their current customers. But a lot of the technology is disrupting current business models. You need to take a step back and say, is this business that I'm doing, or the way that I'm doing it, is there ways to change this to stay competitive or disrupt the market? So I think that that's a big piece of it. And when you talk about the blurring in the global space, one of the things that comes to mind, I know this isn't what you asked me exactly, but one of the biggest problems is as you look at your networks aren't very well defined anymore. It used to be had very well defined boundaries, and it was really easy to tell. But now with cell phones and different mobile devices and customers and vendors and so forth on your network, it's really hard to tell. It goes back to trying to tell who is on a facility if they should be there or not. And so now you have people on your network that it's really tough to tell if they should be there or not. And so that's changing things, and really great. How do you deal with that? But then are there ways you can leverage that to enhance your business rather than look at it as being a problem?
That's right. That's right. So security is about doing what's best to protect your idea, initiative, or entity in a digital global age. While enterprise information security architecture, the practice of applying a comprehensive and rigorous method for describing a current or a future structure and behavior for an organization, security processes, information security systems is in practice so that they align with the organization's core goals and strategic direction. It relates more broadly to the security practices of business optimization in that it addresses business security architecture, performance management, and security process architecture, as well as not so much of the global competitive landscape and the strategic competitive threats in cyberspace, geospace, and space. Do you think the ongoing enterprise information security architecture suffices the strategic security needs? Because I see that, mostly when you look at the security approach of an organization, they focus mainly on, like you talked before, that, legal and compliance, those kind of risk. But nowhere do you see the integration of strategic risk, with the security architecture. So do you think the ongoing enterprise information security architecture suffices the strategic security needs as seen across, enterprises currently?
Well, I think that when you look at the architecture today, the I think the way people are thinking about networks is constantly evolving and changing. But I really think we're kind of at crossroads in terms of security, where there's a lot of things that we're doing that don't work, and we know they don't work, but we don't know what else to do yet. So a great example is passwords, usernames and passwords, for instance. That's an old model that really, in this day and age, is kind of broken. Another one I think of is a social security number that we use, with the Social Security Administration, where that's it's a number that's easily stolen, and as soon as they have it, they have your entire identity. And technology's moved so far beyond that, but we're still clinging to these old ways because we're really not sure what to do next. And so I think there's a lot of really interesting problems out there that go beyond the architecture piece of, and I think it's going to evolve around identity and how we understand who and what is on our network, and we can quickly identify and reduce risk based off of probably a profile of what you're doing, as opposed to being 100% sure that it's you, which is what we think we can do today.
Yes, I hear you are saying that. I hear that organization enterprises do acknowledge, they have identified that these are the challenges and these are the things that they would like to change, but they don't know where to go or what to do at this point, because there is no clear information available that what would be a better technology, what would be a better process to do this, so that you can minimize the risk, or mitigate the risk. So what are the changes that you think would be coming to manage the challenges that you just talked about?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that it's going to go back to probably along the lines of your idea question, where a lot of people are thinking through this, and a lot of people are kind of coming up with different ideas of how we rethink the way that we do things. And so identity is one that comes to mind for me, because it's just such a broken model right now, and there's just got to be other ways of doing it. And so I think the things that we think about are really applying identity principles based off of risk again. And so today, if you could be somebody that has, maybe as a developer, and you have all of the source code for your company's products, and you all the IP is available to you, and we give you a username and password just like we would for somebody that perhaps is just in call center, and they're just taking calls and really don't have access to much. And so that's probably not the best way to do that. And so really thinking about the folks that we have, maybe that are in a group 9 to 5, we make sure that they can only access their computer between the hours of 9 and 5 if they're in the building, because we don't want them working from home. They never should be working from home, so that should raise a red flag. And then make it really easy for them to log in, because at the end of the day, they don't have access to much that we really should be overly concerned about. Whereas if we have domain admin, we may add multi-factor authentication in different ways, and look at doing that transparently. So obviously, you give them a card reader, maybe, and they got to put a card in, and they enter a PIN, and they have to use a username and password. So that's a couple of factors. But then behind the scenes, looking at the behavior of the users and constantly kind of evaluating, are they doing the things that we would expect this person to do? And if they're not, and if something odd is happening, then you focus on the exceptions and not on everybody.
So what I hear is that you are focusing on behavior analysis to be able to identify the threats, across the enterprise. So let me ask you this very simple question, in general, and as also very specific to your efforts in your organization. What are the goals of enterprise security that you would,
Yeah, so I would say that our goals are really pretty straightforward. The first one is to identify all the risk that we feel that one is identifiable, right? There's always going to be some sort of risk that you don't know about, you can identify. And then taking a business approach in terms of working really close with our business. What's the risk that they're willing to accept, and what risk are they not willing to accept? And then focus on the risk that they're not willing to accept. Layering in some sort of protection for the risk we can identify. So the kind of the unknown unknowns, you know, when you think about it that way, and then the known unknowns. So you focus on some of those things, and how do we do some different activities or use perhaps technology or whatever to kind of understand how we mitigate that type of risk as well. So that's where I think we go back to our associates in a really great awareness program. And so they see something that doesn't make sense. We may not know what's doing that, but they know it's not right. So then we can look at that and really focusing on exceptions and oddities, I guess, and really trying to understand that.
Sure. When you say that you are, making an effort to identify those risks, who is involved in the risk identification? Is it everyone bottom up, or is there a specific group that is responsible for risk identification?
Well, we, as an enterprise, identify risk. And we determine, what we feel is the most notable risk, and then we obviously focus a lot of time and resources on that. But when we look at how we mitigate a lot of this, from my standpoint, is I leverage everything, and so we look at using different techniques to raise awareness, to make sure that people are asking questions, that they're paying attention to what's happening, and they know who to call if something odd is happening. But then the other thing that we have done is really shifted our workforce a little bit, in that I have people that are dedicated to looking at our network and trying to find oddities from a technical standpoint. So they know what a normal packet looks like, and they know what a non-packet looks like. And hackers know how to make their packets undetectable to our systems. But if you have somebody looking at it, even if they don't know what it's doing, they know it's not, you've got a chance to do something about it.
Right. So, what are your thoughts on the security framework that is used by the enterprises? What kind of security framework you are using?
We mostly use NIST. I think that when I look at the security frameworks, I think they have obviously they all have their strengths and weaknesses. I think it's important is that you use that as a guideline, and you don't get too tied into some of the frameworks. I think when I look at the kill chain is one that I think about, or when they talk about virus, and that's useful for understanding it. It's not necessarily I think if you blindly apply those concepts, that you're probably going to run into trouble. It oversimplifies things on purpose.
Right. So, according to you, the NIST framework, is it effective for your organization in the security goals that you have?
Yeah, I think it's mostly effective for us. What we use it is, I think maybe we're using it backwards. So we've identified our risk, and then we've used NIST to kind of help organize our activities and make sure that we didn't miss something, and as a way to also organize our thoughts and our approach. But we also don't talk about NIST every day, and we don't. There's not lists of frameworks and books on how to do all this everywhere, because it's really, at the end of the day, we're focused mostly on risk.
I lost you.
Once we identify and
Yeah, I think your voice is breaking up, Brian.
okay.
Okay. So, when you say that you are using NIST framework, how are you identifying the independent risk or the internal risk that your organization faces in the cyberspace, and the interdependent risk? Because there are two different aspects. Each entity, each organization, each enterprise, they are facing their own internal risk in the cyberspace or cybersecurity risk that they need to manage on their own. But there are also those risks which, even though they identify, they won't be able to manage on their own, because other parties are involved in that. In other parties are also responsible for those risks. So how do you manage those interdependent risks facing your organization?
So what we do is, when we talk about a lot of those interdependencies would be between us and our customers or us and our vendors. And so we do things like hire outside auditors and pen testers to look at those connections and help us understand the risk that's associated with that, and how we approach that. And then we're have close associations with the FBI, for instance, to really understand the threats and emerging things that they're seeing, and so we can see how that applies to us. If there's concerns there, working with security vendors that will help us understand, where the trends that they're seeing across their much broader networks, and larger security footprints. And so we bring all that together and we try to understand, where we see the most, vulnerability, and then we apply it to what's the information we most care about. And so again, it's trying to say, here's what we really care about. Here's the the threat to that, and then what are the vulnerabilities we can close around that.
Um, it's generally said that the security is often the last thing to be considered in business information system design, and often gets relegated to the status of a few add-on fixes when all other design decisions have been already frozen. And at that point, it leads to increased complexity and cost of support. If security is to be effective in achieving business goals, then such approach is a cause of concern. What are your thoughts, and what is your observation in your organization? Is that the security is the last thing to be considered, or is it something that is considered right at the beginning when the business information system is being designed?
Yeah, so I think that goes back to our awareness program. So that when we talk about making users aware, it's not just business users, it's also the IT users.
Yes.
And so we've been really successful at, there's always going to be a meeting, somebody's talking about something, and there's no security person present. But we've been really successful in having somebody in the room say, hey, wait a second, this sounds like an area where IT security folks, we need to get some more people involved. And so we generally have gotten pulled into all of those conversations. The other advantage I have is that my leadership is very supportive of what we're doing. And so there's this, I think, this knowledge of the groups of people that do these kind of things, that at the end of the day, I have veto power over the work if it's going to be done insecurely or put us in jeopardy, to make them go back and fix it. And so they don't want to go back and fix it. So they have that motivation to do it right the first time.
Now, like you say, that you are making a lot of effort in creating awareness about the security programs, or about the security controls and different risks. But while most organizations across nations are acknowledging the need for security, they lack the necessary knowledge needed to build effective security program. What are organizations doing to acquire knowledge? I mean, you are trying to create awareness about a lot of different aspects of security, but how do you acquire knowledge? How do you get that information about the ongoing ever changing fundamentals of the security that are going on right now?
Well, some of that's, some of that knowledge is really thinking about where's the best place to do something. So there's work that we, for a security operations center, for instance, is not something that we could ever have an effective security operations center, because it would be very expensive, and even if I could hire some really great people in there, they don't have the visibility that a vendor would perhaps. So that's the kind of work that I view as better for a vendor to do, because they have a very broad perspective, and you can see much more of the threat landscape. So from that standpoint, that's where I look at their knowledge is very helpful to us. Internally, I look at it as there's a lot of jobs that is really hard to hire somebody that has all the experience that you want, because they're either expensive, they're rare, or some cases they may just not exist. And so that's the standpoint where we look at it and we say, or else their experience just doesn't apply to our network for whatever reason. And so you're looking at a different perspective. So one is, I think, look at security people are really great when you get them from other parts of IT. So someone that comes with a really great networking background or a really great database or fill in the blank background, and you train them and teach them to be a security person, tend to be really, really good. Or you just hire somebody that doesn't have all the experience that you want, and you understand that you're going to have to train them, which I view as an advantage, because then you can get what you want and train them into what you need, as opposed to hiring somebody that's maybe not quite what you need and they're more expensive.
Yes, yes. Now, there are concerns that IT initiatives are being adopted without the proper network security oversight or controls in place. What are your thoughts? I mean, is that something that you have observed in your enterprise organization?
Well, I think that's always a danger, because technology has become so consumerized that everybody has technology, they have access to it, and they all want to do something with it to improve the business. So there's a constant danger of somebody in the business doing something with all the right intentions, and then boom, there's something happening that you didn't know about. And so what we try to do is, one is really work with the business to get them the capabilities that they need. And the other one is that we don't tell them no just because it's not an IT initiative. Instead, we try to work with them to say, okay, if this is filling a gap that you have, let's talk about that. I mean, let's talk about how we do this the right way, as opposed to just doing it. And so we really try to have that partnership, make sure that so some of it's just how you brand yourself internally. And so we don't want security to be the no organization all the time, which a lot of times in the past that's what it was. Instead, it's really challenged my team to say, think about what they're trying to do, think about how they're trying to do it, and understand that they have a need, and how do we get them what they want, as opposed to just tell them no.
Right, right. Now, there are concerns that organizations say they are challenged by too many overlapping controls and processes that tend to cause trouble. Is that your observation, that there are too many overlapping security controls?
I think that's definitely a danger. And so one of our expressed objectives, and one of the things that I've really pushed my team to consider, is how do we make security transparent to the user? So how can I make you more secure, but from the user interaction standpoint, you feel like almost like there's no security, or like you're even less secure, because I'm making you jump through hoops to do something that really shouldn't be a big deal. And so again, it's going back to looking at what information is important. How do you control that? And if it's really not that important, why are we locking it down and segmenting it, compartmentalizing it like we have in the past? Because your role says you're doing X, but half the time you need to get to Y, but our systems don't let you get to Y. So you create all these workarounds that make it look like something's happening. In reality, you're just trying to do your job. Why not just give you access to both? And so how do we look at things differently that way?
Right, right, right. Now, there are concerns that organizations say that the security staff is too busy responding to alerts, events, and they don't have enough time with training, planning, or network security strategies. This points to the global cybersecurity skill shortage, probably. So what are your thoughts in that? Do you face those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a concern is how do you focus on the alerts that are real alerts and ignore the ones that aren't
Yes.
a big deal. And so that's, I think that's a constant challenge. And part of that is that, kind of going back to my last example, is if I'm trying to keep people from getting to information that they need to get to do their jobs, and so they're creating alerts, that something's happening, and you
Yes.
create all this noise because you try to over control information.
Right.
So by rethinking that, that's one of the ways you can, I think, reduce some of that noise. And then a lot of it's just a lot of work, continually tuning what you're looking at and making sure you're focused on the really important things and not wasting time on things that aren't.
That's right. That's right. Now, there are also concerns that organizations are challenged by security policies that are too complex and can't be enforced with the current network security processes and controls. Everyone talks about contextual security, where network access is governed by user identity, devices, location, time of day, etc. So the problem is that this requires central management, uh, data exchange, and technology integration. Is that something that organizations are having that successfully within their initiatives, that they have successful integration, technology integration, and data exchange and all? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think they're right. I mean, policy is really tough to write it well and cover all the ground that you're trying to cover. What we try to do is change our policies around information security to be information centric instead of device location or person centric. And in the past, you'll see a lot of things written where the policy will talk about cell phones differently than tablets and differently than a laptop, and it gets really confusing. Instead, what we've tried to do is shift it to say who, as one of our employees, are an important piece of safeguarding our information. So regardless of where that information is, you have certain responsibilities, and we're going to ask you to help us safeguard that and not focus on where it's at or what it happens to be doing.
Right, right, right. Now, there are malware continues to increase in sophistication and has more avenues for execution. While work at home flexibility increases critical security issues, how do you manage the risk of malware with the on-site, off-site security tools, technologies, and processes complexities?
Well, I think that's an area where looking at newer technology and existing technology, and leveraging VPNs, for instance, and doing applying different techniques to try to keep your systems on your system, even if they happen to be remote. Um, because obviously we have a lot more safeguards and a lot more protection you do on your home network. So how do we do things that allow you to work easily from home, but leverage our system security capabilities? And so VPN is a great example of that, and applying, or I should say, implementing VPN in a way that's easy to use as a user and that doesn't degrade your performance so badly that you don't want to use it.
Hmm. Right, right. So the battle between company-owned devices and user-owned devices will likely continue for years to come. How do organizations or employers across industries protect their sensitive data on users' personal devices? Do you have a strategy by which you protect your organization's sensitive information or confidential information on the user's personal devices?
Mhm. So that's another area where we look at the personal device. And so one of our, I guess, our express goals is that we want to make sure that we keep Schneider's information on your device protected, but we also want to make sure that we don't um, have access to anything but our own data on your device. So we don't want anything to do with your data. As an associate, we want you to keep your privacy. We want to keep our information safe. And so we look at things like containerization and encryption to do that, so that when you're no longer with the company, or you lose your phone, for instance, that the Schneider information is not accessible, and then we can remove just that information and not touch any of your information.
Right, right. So probably this is the last question, Brian, is that if you have to change something, what would you change about how the enterprise security is managed right now, or performed across organizations?
Well, I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I've been advocating, I think a lot of people are changing their mindsets about it too, is just leveraging the people in the process side of things and having a very holistic approach that uses technology in concert with people and process, not to replace people or process, or not to with this idea that it's going to solve all of our problems. And so, really looking at this as a very holistic problem. It's a system problem. I don't mean IT systems. People, process, and
Yes,
technology is
overall system.
Right. And each one of them are very important. And I think if you focus on any one of those too much, then obviously you'll fail to solve the problem. And so, when I look at some of the big breaches that have happened, generally it hasn't really been a technology thing. It's been a process piece that somehow failed, which is a really tough problem, right? I mean, enterprises are huge. There's lots of people. There's lots of interaction. So it's always going to be a challenge. That's why it's even more important to focus on that. So you have a process that allows you to leverage people and technology and have a fighting chance at it. And so really, I think if there's one thing I would change is to continue that mindset of how do we leverage all of our corporate and enterprise assets to help solve this problem.
No, I think that is the heart of the problem, Brian, that you just mentioned, that we have a habit of, looking at silos or, operating as silos. Whereas we know we need to have a very integrated approach right now. And irrespective of whether it's a human body or an enterprise or a nation or an industry or a global community, there are so many different components. I mean, that's why I, have been talking very aggressively about how to look at nations risk or country risk, based on each of its component, like NGIOA, nations is government, industries, organizations, academia, because there are so many interdependencies, so many interconnectedness, so many you know interrelationships that we have to address that as a whole unit. And that's the only way to probably manage risk effectively. So your thoughts and focus is at the right place, and I hope that in your initiatives going forward you are able to bring that holistic approach, integrated approach, so that you can identify, evaluate, and manage all the enterprise risk effectively. And we wish you really the best wishes so that you are successful in your efforts. And I think that's it for today, friends. This is an enterprise risk, enterprise security, enterprise risk management. It's such a fascinating topic, and there's so many changes happening in that probably we can talk for hours. But for today, we are going to conclude here. And Brian, we really appreciate you joining us and sharing your thoughts on enterprise security and how to make this bring the security to every enterprise in a more effective, more efficient manner. And we thank you for that. So that's it for today, friends. Although we can talk about this, like I said, for hours and probably for a very long time. We are concluding our session here. For more information on the risk roundup and who is going to be on the next risk roundup, please go to riskgroupllc.com. And thank you, everyone, and please join us again.